I'm about to build in my Minecraft city for the next 100 days or 33 hours. I know that doesn't explain why I haven't uploaded in about half a year, but the streak of not uploading is broken now, so let's get into it. I started off with the road layout. The area that we're going to be working with is a bit east of the downtown, which is still completely empty after almost 2 years of building this up. I put a lot more effort than I usually do into this layout, and I actually used diagonal roads, which I'm going to say now were an absolute pain to build on. This is actually the first 100 days video I've made in 3 years, back when I was a little child with zero building skills. A lot of that has changed since then, and that will be reflected in this video. I started building after about 4 days, and the first build was the metro station. I don't know what I was thinking when I decided to build every single station of the system all at once, because I've ended up destroying and rebuilding almost all of them. I built a pretty standard old style building here, and next to it I began building one of the larger buildings in the area, being the hospital on day 8. Keep in mind that I have always day on in this world, so I'm counting it as 1 day equals 20 minutes. This building had a very different style to the last one, being a lot more modern, and I wanted to make it look like it was built in different phases, so different parts of the building had slightly different designs. Since the challenge only allows 33 hours, I had to skip over the interior for this, however I probably will come back to this in the future. 33 hours might sound like a lot of time, but when you actually put effort into detailing up every single thing you do, it really isn't. Like in total there's probably about 500 hours on this world. On day 12 I started filling in this corner with some pretty standard brick buildings. Moving on to day 16, I finished the area around the hospital, and after this it was time to move on. And for the next week I ended up getting a bit sidetracked and starting to fix up this mess of a highway. I never properly thought out the highways, so it took me until now to realize that parts of it made absolutely no sense. Like this interchange leading right into a low traffic high street, which I know is incredible city planning. So as you probably expected, I demolished the whole section of the highway leading to that area and we built a new branch going directly east instead, which made a bit more sense in my head. I don't know where this highway is going to lead to, as the direction I put it in is just multiple thousand meters of sea after this point, but that's a problem for another day, which will probably not come out for another year if I'm being honest, if we're looking at my current upload schedule. I also extended the highway out in this direction, where it will probably connect to the airport. I'm not sure how at the moment, but again, I will probably fix that in another episode. I spent some time building up this interchange, which was definitely not a fun hour and a half of my time, but after I was done with it, it was actually a pretty good result, and it was definitely the best one I've built in the city yet, despite that not being a very high bar. Moving on, it was day 24 at this point, almost a quarter into the video already, and I decided to go back to the urban area where I started finishing off this corner. This is pretty much the first building I've made with this type of corner, and I think it turned out looking pretty decent. I'm really trying to focus on the details in this video, so that means the rooftops and the random corners as well, and by day 28 I was done and swiftly moved on to the next build. At this point I was fully locked into the building process and everything was coming together pretty nicely. On day 33 I began filling in this area over here, and by this point I didn't want to torture myself with more diagonal roads, so I made sure to keep them straight in this area. I also added a bit of a buffer to the highway with a bunch of trees and this industrial looking fence. I'm not sure if this is completely accurate, as where I live there's not really that many urban highways near residential areas, but it would just make sense to block out the noise and visual pollution for the people living in the nearby buildings, which speaking of, I cloned some townhouses from the downtown and shrunk them down to 4 floors, to add a little bit of variation in the city. After about 6 days, I started filling in this part of the street with a diagonal build, which was an absolute pain to build. as it took me absolutely ages to get the proportions right. I finished up the street on day 46, and after a couple days of building gardens, I started finally building up some new trees. I don't think you'd be able to understand how bad the tree situation in the city has been for years now. It sounds pretty embarrassing to say, but I've been using the exact same tree, which looks terrible by the way, for the last 2 years to lazily fill out any empty space. So in hopes of fixing that, I built up a few new designs, which definitely weren't perfect, but they did look a lot better than what we had before. As you can see, trees are clearly not my strong suit. At this point it was day 51, and half of the project was completed, and for around 16 hours work, I did think that what we had built was a bit underwhelming, as the plan is to build all the way to the coast, and pretty much just fill up our whole district. I spent another day adding in some more trees, and right after, I started the biggest project of this video, being the community centre. I built the exterior with this more modern look to it, and I don't think I need to say it, but this building was huge. The exterior wasn't the reason this took so long, that only took about an hour or so. It was the interior, which I'm not going to say how long it took just yet, but you'll see when it's finished. I tried to put some nice attention to detail into the entrance area, but quickly moved through the building, as in the grand scheme of things this was nothing. The first area that I built up after this small office area was the library, which I tried to implement as much greenery into, as well as other stuff to make the area look as unique as possible. I really like how the library turned out, with the secondary layer as well as these closed off areas, which would be used for reading and studying. I continued on with the gym on day 63. This had pretty much everything from cardio equipment to toilets to changing rooms to all the other equipment. I think this is where the build takes a bit of a hit, as these were much harder to replicate and some stuff looked quite a lot different to how they should look. Like this was the best attempt at a dumbbell rack I could do. Taking a total of 4 days, I don't think the result was too bad. It could have been a lot worse. Look at the hotel gym I built up a year ago for reference, but it still could have been a lot better. To finish it off, I wanted a swimming pool on the top floor, and since I knew it looked a bit weird to only have a few meters of ceiling space in a pool, I expanded the roof by the floor and quickly filled in a pool with some lanes and ladders. And after the changing rooms being finished on day 70, the leisure center was finished after 20 full days. Yeah, 6.5 hours on one building, but honestly I would say it's worth it. On day 71, I continued on, trying to build more of a modern building to fill this really awkward corner out, and even after a couple days of trying to make it work, I still wasn't really feeling it, as it just ended up looking way too blocky and boring with no details. So instead, I went the risky route of building a much more older building, but it was a lot more detailed. It took me another 2 days to get the bottom floor right, as I had to figure out the proportions with some maths, and it was starting to kind of mess with me. By the way, I was 3/4 into the challenge by this point, which was really worrying me as I had a lot left to build. But anyways, I continued on with an orange colour palette, which I don't usually use, and I finished off the building. I think the build turned out looking pretty nice. The debug step really helped me out, but I really had to continue on by now as I only had about 8 hours left to fill out an entire block of the city, which you might be able to tell by this point in the video that's not exactly an achievable goal. It feels a bit shameless, but once again I resorted to cloning buildings from other parts of the city, but I had to do what I had to do. The rest of this video is just going to be a time lapse, which will probably end up being the most satisfying part of the video. Alright, so that takes us to 100 years, and I think that the city is looking so much better and more developed now. So far, this might be my favorite part of the city, and it kind of highlights how much I've improved as a builder since 2023. So I think I'm going to wrap this one up here, after almost 3 months of recording, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching, consider subscribing, and I'll see you next time.